I just think over time you just realize you don't get too high, you don't get too low, right? Like people tell you you're the shit, you're probably not. And then when people tell you you're the worst, you're probably not. I mean, you really just need to focus on what it is you want to do and do your best. And then let the chips fall where they fall.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Travis Makes Friends. Today, I am stoked to be making friends with Tanner Chidester. What's up, bro?
What's up, man? Hey, you said the last name perfect, by the way.
Hey, thank you. I've seen enough of your ads to know. Hey, I'm Tanner Chidester. Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah, so it's stuck in my mind, man. It's stuck in my mind. No, I appreciate you coming on. I know this is like a super quick, Vegas trip. And so here we are in our little makeshift in-home studio at the moment. And bro, I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a little while. I know we have a bunch of mutual friends and stuff, just schedules and things like that haven't lined up. So I'm glad we're able to make this one happen. You were just telling me you got a big family. You have 6 brothers and sisters, so 7 of you total. And then you're telling me a little bit about your home life. So I want the audience to hear that as well. I want to dive in on some of those specifics. So let's rewind the clock. Let's say 9-10-year-old Tanner Chidester, set the scene for us. Where were you in life? What was happening?
Yeah, so I grew up in Houston. I was born in Utah, actually. I was born in Sandy. A lot of people don't know that. So I was raised LDS or Mormon. My dad, was equivalent of a preacher.
Kids.
Yeah, hence the 7 kids, yeah. My dad was equivalent of what most people consider like a preacher. So he's been, for anyone who's LDS or Mormon, it's a little different, but, he's been a bishopric and stake presidency and stuff like that. And I had 2 older sisters and I had 2 younger brothers and then 2 younger sisters. So growing up, I guess you'd say I was kind of a strange kid because my parents were very conservative. I never heard a cuss word until I think I was 8 or 9. I played tea parties with my sisters. So around the age you're talking about, I was getting bullied a lot. And so one day after I realized they were bullying me, I went home to my parents around 12 years old and I said, hey, I want to start working out. And I told them some BS, but I want to kick their ass. I mean, that was really, I was done with it.
Yeah.
And I started working out. My parents would take me to the gym about 5:30 a.m. I'm 12.
Yeah, 12.
And then they dropped my sisters.
In Texas or in Utah?
Texas.
Okay.
Texas. And they dropped my sisters off at Bible study. And then I'd work out and they pick me up. I'd go to first period, which was gym, and then I'd get a shower. So after about 3 months, you're going through puberty and, you get newbie gains. People started giving me compliments and I was like, okay, that was the first time I had like a positive reinforcement for working through something difficult. And so that really set the stage, I think, for me, where I really got serious about sports because I think, 1, I enjoyed what happened, but 2, I was good at it. And so really from 12 to 22, I was just all about sports. I mean, the way I attack business now, I remember going into my sophomore season, being on varsity, there's like 1 to 3 guys who make varsity as a sophomore. So it was like this huge deal. And I trained 9 hours a day all summer and I made the varsity. And
what sport?
Football.
Yeah.
And I still remember I would train, I was still a 2-sport athlete, but I did 3 hours of basketball, 3 hours of running, 3 hours of lifting every day the whole summer. And so I just kept getting these positive reinforcements of like, if you put in the work, if you put in the work, if you put in the work. So I took that as far as I could go till I was about 22. I did get to play some Division I football. I got hurt a lot. I don't think I was good enough on top of that, but I couldn't even stay healthy. And so around that time I met a guy, you probably know him, David Fry. And you don't. Okay. So he married Russell Brunson's cousin. Okay. Right? And so he comes to me, and at this time I had some falling out with my parents. I won't get on with that, but I had a fall with my parents, and I stopped kind of going to church, and he really wanted me to go back to church. And that's how this started. And he said, hey, look, what's your goal? And I said, I want to make a bunch of money. And he's like, well, that's not going to happen with engineering, which is what I was studying. And I had good grades, but he just laid it out for me. So he said, look, drop out of school, start going back to church. And if you do, then I'll show you everything I know about business. And he built some 7-figure online businesses. So I drop out. Pretty much everyone was against me. My girlfriend broke up with me because of it. Her mom obviously was not happy. My family, it was kind of a mix, I think.
They were happy to see you back in church, but didn't want to drop out type of thing.
Yeah, they didn't put me down, but I don't think they thought it would work. And so now I'm about 22, and for the next 2 years, I don't really make any money, but I learn how to build funnels and how emails work and pixels and just all the kind of little things you need to know, in my opinion, to run a good business, at least online. And I finally get to a point where I say, hey, I appreciate you, but I need to go live my life. I'm 23. So I go back up to Utah where some of my family is. and I start working as a server and doing door-to-door sales. You know, Utah's big on that, right? So I actually sold for Alder.
Okay.
And competitive event, right?
Yeah.
They're competitors and stuff.
Yeah,
and right. But I'm still not making money. So I'm learning, I'm doing these things, and in hindsight, I think it prepared me for this moment. But at the time, I just feel I'm going backwards. Right. Yeah. So now I'm 25 and we're actually out selling alarms. And I've already been out there maybe 6 months because I went out early. I went out in like February. Mm-hmm. And I looked down at my phone. I remember to this day, I looked down. I don't know what caused it, but I looked down. I looked at my bank account, and I just remember thinking, I have the same amount of money now that I had 3 years ago.
Oof.
And it just was this kind of realization, this isn't working.
Right.
And so that day, I called my mentor. I said, look, if something doesn't happen soon, I got to go back to school. Like, I'm 25, man. I'm a loser. Like, this isn't working. And I was embarrassed, you know, because I'm killing myself to try to get this thing to work, but I didn't know how. So I see an ad on Facebook, how to start an online fitness business. And at this time, I didn't really have social media that much. And I don't even think I really got on. I just thought it was stupid.
Yeah.
And I still kind of feel that way. It's just with business now, you kind of need it, right? Totally. And so I click on this ad. I get on the call. High pressure sold me. Didn't know what even high ticket sales were. I had $2,000 in my account. Gave him everything. Put the rest on a credit card. I had to apply for one. I didn't even have a credit card at 25, which was crazy. And I remember going in the program, and the first 3 videos I watched, I'm just like, bro, what did I do? This is like just emotional fluff.
Yeah,
like, I don't care. I didn't need that. I felt like, at least.
Yeah.
So I just asked the coach, dude, just tell me what to do, please. He goes, okay, just message people, get them on a call, and close them. And I was like, that's it? He's like, yeah. I was like,
this is what I paid.
Okay. Yeah, this is so stupid. And 5,000 at the time, for context, anyone listening, that probably felt like 100,000 right now.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it was a chunk of change where I'm like, okay. So I start doing it, and I made $10K in a week. And I call my parents. I'm like, hey, I figured this out. I'm going to move home. Let me pay you a little bit.
Fitness coaching.
Yeah, fitness coaching is like, let me pay you a little bit, but like, I'm going to come home. So I go home, and I don't come out of my room for a year. I remember I would go 3-4 weeks without seeing my dad because I was so dedicated, and he would come home and I'd be asleep or I'd be working, whatever. And a year later, I'd done $1 million. And then all these trainers started asking me for help. That's when I got my first ClickFunnels award, which, you know, it still is, but at the time especially, they're like, wow, like, and this guy doesn't sell like business coaching, right? It was different. And
at the time, there was frankly just fewer people that won that award, right? What year was this?
Yeah, I think 5 years ago. It was like 2017-ish.
Yeah.
And I remember these trainers started lining up. I said, hey, man, like, I don't really like doing this. You know, I paid a couple coaches where, you know, they scammed me or screwed me.
Sure.
And I have a better take on it now, you know, obviously, but it didn't work out. And I said, hey, I don't want to do it. But they kept asking. So finally, I had about $150,000, $200,000 of people just on a waiting list. Like, hey, we'll pay you $10,000. I was like, you know, I'm 26. I'm like, fuck, dude, like, I got to take this money. So I start doing it, and that goes hyperbolic. That year, I did 10 million. And I worked even more. I mean, I just had no life. I'll be honest with you. Like, I had no life.
So your first full year was $1 million.
Yeah.
And then your second full year, or was
10.
this like 3?
So the second year was 10
to 10.
We went 1 to 10. It was crazy, and that was probably the hardest year I've ever had because just the jump was so massive.
Yeah, no kidding.
And
that's
then
a completely different business anatomy.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I mean the trainer business just, I mean, like, first month it was like $300,000.
Wow.
You know, and I was like, holy shit. And then just, you know, I have more to play with. The margins are bigger, a little more expensive. And it matters with that because you're like, hey, I can spend another $2,000 to get a customer. Right. That changes the game. So the third year, we opened up to what is Elite CEOs now because in my head, hey, if I go general, we get a little more. And we did. We went to 15 million. Now I in hindsight, I wonder if I should have done that. But I think
in general, basically, you teach any online.
Yeah, so the same principles, just less specific to fitness, right? Yeah. So like if I'm teaching a messaging, it's not just fitness messaging, it's like different examples. Mm-hmm. And I think now in hindsight, looking back, there's pros and cons to both, but I think staying niche down long term, there's advantages to that. Easier fulfillment, easier, you know, to like scale the same thing over and over. Sure. But my mindset now of where I am, because I stepped out of the company about 2 months ago, is what I've seen from the people who've built billion-dollar companies or just massive companies is almost all of them. It's interesting, but almost all of them started in internet marketing, and then they they make this pivot where they just get in a better vehicle that just can scale.
Yeah.
And that was actually super interesting to me because I'd say, yeah, how'd you start? Oh yeah, I did SEO. Oh yeah, I ran an ad agency.
Yeah.
And so I think now that I'm on the other side, I have 5 companies I own now, and then just also consulting, like tens of thousands of clients, is it really does matter what the vehicle is. And the marketing is important, but if you can mix like internet marketing type skills with a really good offer,
in a strong market that's growing, and
and that's where it blows up. And so that's been very interesting to see now that I'm on the other side, because at first Elite COs peaked out, like one of our highest months was right under 2 million. And since that time, we've been in that kind of like 1 to 1.5 million range. And I would get so mad because I'm like, man, like, why can't we scale more? Like, I'm spending enough on the ads, the costs are going up. Like, why we're optimizing? But you just get to a point with certain offers. It's just the nature of the beast. And I think an easy way to describe it is it's streamlining the fulfillment. And so why people get so crazy for tech is because it's easy to streamline. With service, you get Jill who's a 6, Tom who's a 2, George who's a 10, Rob who's a 3. And so the issue is not necessarily the product. It can be, right? But let's say your product's as good as you can make it. They're all going to get different results. And so therefore, you don't kind of get that stacking over time or that same result, which is what creates that crazy word of mouth. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's like, with Gym Launch, when Mosey scaled that, why I think he did so well is the least of these, the worst clients he got could still make $30K in a month or whatever it was.
Right.
And that's what changed it for him, I think. So
yeah, the client results, like he talks for somebody who's not, I mean, he had a SaaS business, but somebody who's not known as somebody being in SaaS, he talks a lot about product market fit, which he obviously worked on a lot.
And I don't think he knew it was going to get that big. Like I asked him yesterday, I was like, do you know? He's like, no, bro.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think it's pretty, like in his story, it seems clear just because it's like, I was worried about being bankrupt. And then 6 months later, had crossed whatever $3 million in sales or whatever, and it was like when you're in the bankrupt mode, your mind isn't thinking about how can I build $1 billion company. At all. You're thinking about like how do I like not lose my entire reputation and have to like completely get rid of all of my shit, and you know what I mean? Like you're thinking about what happens tonight, not what happens in 12 years from now. Oh, 100%. You said something like earlier, bro. I just don't want to gloss over it. And I know I'm backtracking quite a bit here, but you were talking about when you were 12, and it was the first time that you received like positive recognition for putting in hard work and seeing a result happen. Yeah. And when you said that, it made me think about how many people, probably the percentage of the U.S. population, in terms of a percentage, what percent would say that they still have not had that? Even into their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. And I know from you, it came from you had a chip on your shoulder. It was like, people are making fun of me, and fuck those people. I'm going to show them what's up. I'm going to go work out, and I'm going to stay consistent at this thing. I'm going to work hard. Even if it means I have to get up earlier and I got to go to the gym before gym class, I'm going to do it because fuck them. Yeah. Do you think that you have to have something like that? Or like, can you, if you're somewhat comfortable, or maybe, you're in a situation where people aren't making fun of you, you don't have the chip on your shoulder, maybe your parents are wealthy, or, you know what I mean? Like, can you create this type of artificial chip to make you want something bad enough to put in the work? Cause I fully agree that it's a necessary like notch that you have to put in your confidence belt to teach you that if I do this, I can achieve this.
Yeah, I think it's rare. I'm sure there's someone out there, because whenever you say never, it only takes one to make it untrue. But almost everyone I've spoken to who has been ultra successful, they have some type of story where things don't go their way or they're up against something. So the one reason I fell in love with fitness is you can see the results. So it took me 3 months, and during those 3 months, I'm like, man, maybe I should stop. I'm not really getting bigger. But after those 3 months, like consistently, my muscles were growing, and then people gave me that feedback. I was like, oh, so this could work in grades and girls and whatever. People just can't see it. So to your point, I think the hard thing is no one's going to look at you and say, Travis, wow, you worked so hard today. I can tell.
Yeah.
No one sees that. But that's what's hard is I think for me as a kid, getting that positive reinforcement on the workout where people could see the visible results, in my head, it was like, it clicked. I was like, oh, like if I do this in other things, I'll get the same result. I do think it's hard to, it's like playoffs. I think it's very hard to artificially try to create something that's not there. So I had friends who were very wealthy.
Yeah.
And they just haven't done as well as me. And that's not to say, that doesn't even mean the way I live life is the right way. Trust me, it's the more I'm living, the more I realize it just really doesn't matter, and it really has to be what you want to do, and a lot of people just don't really care. And so, but to that point, they didn't do as well, because what I saw is when I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I need something, and he's like, no, like, you're on your own, man. Yeah, good luck. Yeah, those parents would give them money, and I'd see them like, hey, I need $100, for cookies. I remember they were like, yeah, Dad, I'm getting cookies, and he's like, what, $100 for cookies? And they obviously weren't for cookies. Yeah. But I'm sitting there going, dude, my dad's never given me a dime. He told me at 14 I needed to get a job. He's like, can I go to the movies? He's like, well, do you have a job? I was like, no. He's like, oh, I guess can't go. And he walked off. And that was kind of my upbringing. I hated him at the time, but as I got older, it really taught me that, like, no one can save me. Yeah. And I think that it made me kind of bitter, but at the same time, it created kind of that drive to be successful. And even to this day, that's part, sometimes people are like, hey bro, you got to chill, but it's part of who I am now, because it's that kind of drive to prove that you are worth something, that you can do it. So to your question, I do think it's tough for some people, because like no one's going to give you that. And especially when it comes to business or music or like things that are intangible, no one's going to, again, like look at you and say, wow, dude, been working so hard, you deserve it. Yeah. And that's the hard part.
Here's everything you want on a silver platter.
Yeah. And so I think once I got it in fitness, it was easier to transition to business and other things that people couldn't see, because I knew it was the same principle and I didn't need that reinforcement anymore. But I'll be honest, as a young kid who's struggling and being bullied and has low self-confidence, I mean, that did change the trajectory of my life. 100%.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a necessary step in building confidence. And I don't think that you can run into anybody with any certain level of success in life, no matter what field, industry, if you're talking about money or if you're measuring if something different, they all have a base level of confidence. Even if it's mixed with some insecurity, they are still confident about something.
Right.
So that shift for you was that initial like, oh, if I do what I say I'm going to do every day,
like the results follow,
even though there's pain, at some point, it's going to be a good thing that I did that. And I'm going to be happy that I did that. And it teaches me that I know that now I can go do that in something else.
Yeah. And I think, I don't remember where I heard it, but they talk about you have the insecurity that you're not good enough, but you have the confidence that you can do it. And that's where that drive comes from, because you believe you can do it, but you're like, can I? Like, can I? And I think that's a trait of very successful people, because the dumbest people I know think they know everything, and successful people, they know a lot, but they still realize how much they don't know. And I really learned that specifically when I was doing petroleum engineering. I was taking, I think it was six maths, above Cal 3. And I was like sitting there, I'm like, there's not a damn number on my worksheet. It's all letters. And it's supposed to be math class. And those are moments like that too, where it just really, you build this confidence because you've done these hard things, but then you also kind of get humbled a little bit, and you realize you're human and how much you don't know. And that, I think that's kind of what breeds that success, because you kind of realize, hey, there's all these things I don't know, but like I've done these hard things before, and you almost want to prove to yourself that you can do it, because that's the reward. The money just doesn't, I can't even tell you, I just don't really care anymore. And it kind of was sad for me for a little while, because it took me 6 months going through some hard stuff to like figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And even now I am, but I kind of came at peace with it, where before my goal was to hit $1 million a month, and then I hit that. And when that's your whole goal in life and you hit it, your life's over. That's kind of tough.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird point to come to, especially because like, what are you, 31?
31 now, yeah.
31? So, like, it's not like you're chilling now. You know what I mean? Like, now, like, this is most people's prime earning years is like 30 to 50, 35 to 45, maybe more condensed. Yeah. So like you still have a few years to go before you're even in like prime, net worth expansion years. And you're already at the point where you're like, oh, well, I don't really have to work. That's a weird position to be in.
Yeah. And just, an extra 50K, 100K to the average person is a lot, but it's
life changing. It's not.
Yeah, but you're like, hey, if I replace myself and put this guy in, I pay him 30, 40 grand a month and I do nothing. That's still better than, doing it. It's just, it's a weird place to be. And it does feel weird. Like I was telling you before we even went live, you almost feel bad it almost feels illegal. Like you're getting these checks, but you're not doing much and your team's working really hard. It feels weird.
Yeah. But hey, that's the beauty of business though, right?
I guess I paid your dues, right? I mean, that's one thing. I'm like, at the end of the day, I do sit there. I'm like, well, I've done every job in the company.
And I was going to say, your team wouldn't be working that hard if they didn't see you do that already. You know what I mean? Like I think they have, 10s aren't going to work for a 5.
Correct.
So like if you want 10s working for you, then you got to become a 10 yourself, But yeah, dude, I can appreciate where right now you're just kind of in this mode of, well, I guess we'll kind of take this day by day and see what comes out of it. So I know that you've kind of been purposefully seeking out advice from people who are kind of at that quote unquote next level. So for you now, is it in your goals to build like $1 billion company? Like where are you thinking you're going to end up?
It's like I flip flop on it. I'd like to do it to prove I could do it. Right. But I don't know if that's a good enough reason to go down that path.
Yeah.
There's two sides of the coin. I mean, the harder you push in one direction, then it's going to pull you farther away from something else. And so, for example, if I ever build $1 billion company, it's going to push, you're going very hard that direction. It's it's one of the pinnacles of life that you could probably say you did. So I'm back and forth because part of me, I'm a very driven person. I like having purpose and I like having goals. At the same time, now looking back and reflecting, you sacrifice a lot to even get to this point. Mm-hmm. Because the way I live now, it feels normal, but I always have to kind of be reminded, like, hey, dude, like what you're doing isn't really normal. Like most people wouldn't consider that normal.
Yeah.
Though it feels normal to me. So I'm flipping. I'm going back and forth, but I think regardless, at some point, I do feel the desire. I'm going to need to do something else. I can't just chill forever.
Sure. Yeah.
And so right now it kind of feels nice, but I'm nearing. It's about the 2-month mark because I really didn't start traveling until February. And it's going to fade. Like anything, it gets old, right? You keep eating the same stuff. You keep going the same places, it gets old. So I think so. I've been asking questions with that in mind. Whatever I do next, I want it to be very high ceiling.
Yeah.
Internet marketing is great. And I think on one hand, people, like, they praise it too much. On the other hand, I think they talk down on it too much. I think it's one of the building blocks you need. But yeah, I've talked about 30 to 40-ish people at this point who've sold companies for 9 or 10 figures. And the similarities has been interesting. I would say that, like, seeing the patterns across the board is what's been the most interesting to me.
Yeah. What are some of those patterns?
Well, first, I think I told you this as well. A lot of them who sold for over $1 billion quickly and bootstrapped, which is even more impressive to me.
Yes, it is.
The VC game to me is just, they just make numbers up.
It's weird.
They just make stuff up. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. And so to guys like you and me, I don't understand. I'm like, you guys are just making shit up. This, like, here's the valuation, but like, how much does it make?
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't make sense then because there's no money. My valuation's lower than yours.
Well,
I make more.
It's currently losing $30 million a year, but
it's
in 14 years, if our numbers are right,
it's so
it
weird.
Might turn a profit.
Yeah, it's so weird to me. And they just go billion or bust. So the thing
right.
I don't like,
that's the game.
I think why I won't go VC is because the person who loses is the CEO. Because 1 out of 10 work, and if you're, one of those 9 CEOs, you give 5 to 10 of your years of your life, and they're gone.
Right. Well, and you have that. I don't know, dude. It almost feels like a burden because even if you raised $200 million, but you went bankrupt, it's like, yeah, you had a team of 3,000 people that were depending on you to figure something out, and you couldn't quite piece it together before you ran out of money, and there was no way that you could get that infrastructure up. It was just like, it's irresponsible spending.
Well, and you have to answer to people. So it was interesting because yesterday, someone who's very affluent and I'm good friends with, he said people are asking like, hey, you should run a private equity firm. We'll give you $200 million. And he's like, bro, I don't need the money. And he's like, then I have to answer to people.
Yeah.
And he's like, the whole point of making money is to be free. And I thought that was actually a very interesting statement.
Yeah.
And so I think to your point, going back to the guys who built $1 billion and bootstrapped is one, they usually have, and girls, they usually had internet marketing background, right? Which was interesting. I saw that over and over because a lot of people are like, oh, internet marketing. But I'm like, it's actually a great way to learn the basics of business.
Sure. Because
you can beat people in marketing and sales, which is important once you have a good offer. But then the second thing was just zero fulfillment. So as close to zero fulfillment as possible. So the two guys specifically, Justin Hartfield, who basically built a Yelp for weed. Okay. So the fulfillment is use our site, done. That was a fulfillment. There's nothing. And then the second one was Byte, which was a competitor to Invisalign. But he's like, hey, they suck at all these things. I'm just going to go in and beat them at the game. And he did. And their cost of acquisition was about 5 times cheaper. They have better customer support, better. Wow. They have some of the best reviews I've seen anywhere. I don't know if they're paying them or something, but I've never seen so many good reviews for a company. And then they had a better sales team. And so that's been the most interesting thing is in internet marketing, at least in my companies now, they make a lot of cash flow. They do. But the bottleneck is the fulfillment because that's what makes it so difficult to scale. And just the nature of what you're selling is it's info, right? And so it's harder. Like you can still make your case, but it's harder than like, all right, these are braces. Like, okay, like this is an app. Like even Uber, it's negative right now, but we see the value. It's like it's a cheaper taxi, right? Yep. At least for now. I think it's starting to get too expensive. I might go back to taxi soon, but
it really is.
Because I think they finally got to make some money.
Right.
I think they underpriced it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think they underpriced it, and now they're going, hey, we haven't made money in 10 years. We got to start becoming profitable. And so I think they're actually going the other direction.
And their drivers need more money. Like there's more competitors there.
I think they're about to run into a problem where taxis, like people are going to go, well, why don't I just use a taxi now?
Right.
That was what made it so nice. It was convenience. And it was cheaper, and now it's going the other direction.
And there was some. I know this is a total rabbit trail, but like recently, the quality of the cars has been like I just upgrade them all the time now. All the time it's black or XL or Lux or like something because if I just do the regular cars, it's like this is like a taxi. Like it's a crappy old car that's dirty. It's like one of the reasons I used to do Uber is that they had a standard that they had set. And now like that standard's kind of going away. It's almost as expensive. It takes longer to get there than the taxi that's already sitting on the curb. You know, it's like, I don't know. I think
I agree.
I've gone in a couple taxis recently.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess we'll see what happens. But to those convos I had, that was the number one thing is just super easy fulfillment. Even the newsletters, like they talked about, I talked to the guy at the Hustle in the Morning Brew.
Sam, yeah.
And they do good. Mm-hmm. They did good, but there's still the issue there is they said, hey, you got to get all these customers and then you got to acquire them cheaper and then you got to sell stuff on the back end. And so again, it just makes it a little bit harder. There's a lot more moving parts than, like I thought Becker did such a great play where he's like, all right, all you marketers and you tracking, I'll build it. And he's done. Mm-hmm. And he sold it for 110 in 2 years. I mean, that's dope. Yeah. But the easy part is, to be frank, I've used them. We don't talk to them anymore. We got set up. We talked to them probably 3-4 months, and then we don't talk to them ever. And then they send us a message. We're like, yeah, we don't need to talk to you because we know how to use it. Yeah. So that's the beauty is if, tech obviously is harder, but that's why people get so crazy for it because at the end of the day, the fulfillment is just negligible. So if you make something for a penny, sell it for $1, that's what I see over and over again.
Economies of scale.
But you got to think harder because there's a lot of stuff you can do to create a lot of value, but then it's all this fulfillment. So I think after Mosey's book, I don't know if you noticed this, but everyone started doing done for you shit. Mm-hmm. Like everyone. And it sounds good on paper, but then the issue is there's all this fulfillment on the back end and operational costs. And so it's not as good as it sounds.
Right.
So I think that's how you have to think is what can I make that's super cheap? And it's going to be hardly any fulfillment that people will still pay a very high price for. And that's what makes it hard.
Yeah. Those economies of scale are difficult, man. Because like you have to have a lot of users and you have to build a product that's valuable to them. Product is hard, especially in tech. Because now it's like, this isn't 10, 15 years ago. You know, it's like there's already millions of apps, tons of software, so many SaaS companies. You know, if you're going to build a product that people actually use in their consistent workflow, it has to be very good, has to be concise, it has to solve a clear problem, and it has to be something they're willing to come back to and use over and over again. And like, that piece is a difficult thing to get to, especially if you're like me and you don't have any tech background.
Well, and if you want them to switch, that's even harder, because a lot of times they don't want to switch purely out of inconvenience. So we have a white label version of Go High Level right now.
Yeah.
And it does great. I mean, we make great money. I love it because the clients, you can add stuff in that makes it a little better. So if Go High Level is just a software, or like ClickFunnels is just software, it's like, hey, like here's ours plus all this other stuff that like it doesn't make sense for ClickFunnels to Go High Level to do because it's a small little micro niche.
Gotcha.
But it's been interesting to just see, we've had to put a lot of time and effort into migrations because they don't want to move. They're like, I don't want to fucking move all this shit. And they're like, we were like, at this point, like, look, we'll just do it for you.
Free
no worry, because we know that once they get in, they're stuck.
Right.
And that's been very interesting to see. And I think that's what makes tech so good. But that's the hard part, is like that. If they're using something to get them to switch, is very difficult.
Totally.
Very hard.
Yeah. Random question for you, bro.
Sure.
Kind of going a little bit more philosophical here. Have you been accused of being arrogant in the last 5 years?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I'm sure not to my face, but I'm sure behind my back. I actually had, because I actually, especially when I was younger, I think, I don't know, man. Maybe I think, especially with social media, it's tough. I think we all do it though. I think I see people on social media, and I definitely get a conception.
That guy's
like,
a dick.
Yeah, like you get this like, preconception of how they are, and then you meet in person, and it's usually not that way. And I just think the farther your distance from people, like, this guy in person, this person from social media, then a friend of that person, you just kind of do that by nature.
Yeah.
But I especially did when I was younger, and I was like fitness modeling and stuff like that. But I don't know, I always just thought I was really confident, and maybe the way it came off to people who didn't know me was that way.
That's more where the question's coming from, is how to deal with the line between arrogance and confidence, because one of them is absolutely necessary and essential for success, for leadership, for getting married. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to have confidence. However, arrogance can literally be the thing that brings you down. So, how do you think about those two, or have you thought about those two?
No, I have a lot. I think I'm going to quote him again. I'm going to paraphrase this, but Alex Hormozi said this, right? And I really liked it. And he said something, you don't build confidence by speaking affirmations in the mirror each day. You build a stack of undeniable proof that says you are who you say you are. And then it says, outwork yourself down. And so I think for me, I think it's how you come off, first off. And, for example, like Andrew Tate, like the way he comes off, it goes very viral. And the reason it goes viral is like you're creating controversial content, which has been interesting for me, because my stuff that goes the most viral is very like controversial. And I'm like, man, like, can you guys just watch the other stuff? It's just as good, but it's not so controversial, because it almost feels like I almost feel like I'm trying to get people pissed off.
Yeah. Well, that's the traditional media defined right there, is
which makes sense why the news does what it does, because it gets
they have shareholders,
right?
They need clicks,
right?
They create stuff that produces negativity. That's how it works.
Yeah, but I think on the other end, it's just you become who you say you are, right? Like, I think for me it was, hey, I wanted to be on varsity or sophomore on varsity. I did it. Then I want to play D1 football. Then I want to start a business. Then I didn't finish engineering, but I would have, and I had a 3.9. And I remember I would go into classes. Oh, you're a football player, you won't make it. Like, they actually thought I was in the wrong class. Like, you're
not allowed to have muscles.
Yeah, and so I think it's just, as you continue to do what you say you will do, that's where the confidence comes from. In terms of other people, what they think, to be honest, it really bothered me at first. But after you've ran millions and millions of dollars of ads, you just don't care. And so, to be frank, like, you just realize that you're in your own little world, and you think everyone's thinking about you.
Yeah.
But people just don't really give a shit.
Yeah.
They have their own problems. And so, I'll go places and people will recognize me, like, oh, Tanner, like, especially gyms. Like, a lot because I've worked with so many trainers and stuff, but I just think over time you just realize you don't get too high, you don't get too low, right? Like people tell you you're the shit, you're probably not, and then when people tell you you're the worst, you're probably not. And so I don't know. I just think for me it was just it's part time, then it's part just becoming who you say you are, and then just try to treat people better. You know, so if you come off in a negative light, just take feedback and try to do better. But I try to do my best. You know, and if someone doesn't like me or they think I come off a certain way, I'm just like, all right.
Yeah, totally. It's really easy to be in that tribe of like, you know, fuck the haters, but also it's like I don't want to on purpose give people room to speak negatively about who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish in the world. Like I still want to be mindful of how of what people perceive me or who people perceive me to be. And I want to work on that as much as I can, you know. At the end of the day, you're never going to please anybody or never going to please everybody. So it's never going to, you're never going to get 100%. But to me, it's like, you can't just have this, you know, overarching paint mentality of like, fuck anybody who doesn't agree with me because I'm right and prove me wrong type of a thing. It feels like you're just like looking for fights, you know what I mean? Like you're just looking to pick fights with people. Yeah. And that's where I stop vibing with it. But at the same time, it is none of my business what other people think about me. And it's also allowed me to have a little bit more empathy for people that I maybe didn't like at first when I first got introduced to their brand or something. And I was just kind of like, why did I feel that way? Like what inside of me immediately judged that person? And it's usually because they're good at something I'm not good at, or they have something that I don't have. Like if I dig deep enough into why I don't like them, there's probably because there's a piece of them that reflects something that I don't like about myself. Right. So like I try to keep that in mind, you know, so it's difficult to kind of toe the line sometimes.
I find that the guys I don't like, people will say, they've said that in the past. They said, because you're like them. Yeah. And it really would piss me off. I'm like, I'm not like him. But I think that's just, it's weird, but I think sometimes as human beings we do that where we see a fault in someone and it's this fault that we don't like about ourselves, and so we see we're like, I would never do that. And I've done that before 100%. But there's also, what's the saying? They say in your 20s you think everyone's thinking, or like in your 20s you care what everyone thinks. In your 40s, I don't remember what it is, but in your 40s you stop caring so much, and then when you're 70, you're like, you realize they weren't talking about you at all.
Yeah, right.
It's something along those lines. But I think that's true too, because as you get older, at least now that I'm in my 30s, I don't know, in your 20s it doesn't hit as hard because you're young, and I'm still young, but I just think, I'm like, man, dude, in the next 9 years, half my life or more will be over. Mm-hmm. And that's a crazy thought to think about. And so it just doesn't make sense to just worry about what people say or think about you all the time. Yeah. You really just need to focus on what it is you want to do and do your best, and then let the chips fall where they fall.
Yeah, I always try to look at just who is somebody's inner circle and what do they have to say about them is typically a better tell to me.
That actually is.
Oh, yeah. Like looking at their content, listening to their podcast, yes, some of that's helpful. But at the end of the day, I still don't know them as a person if we're not homies or we haven't hung out or smoked a cigar together or something. So like I go to who are the people that are closest to them in their life? How long have they been around? What do they have to say about them? And do they stick around? And like, if those are all good and on the up and up, then I'm like, yeah, probably a pretty good person. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like maybe we disagree on some things, but that doesn't mean they're bad. You know, we've gotten to this space in life where if people disagree, you know, everybody just goes like,
I hate it. I hate it.
Well, you're just dumb or you're a moron. It's like, wait, what?
No, I
literally not true.
It's not. I respect the people who stick by their guns. So, you know, people like Andrew Tate, right? He's the most well-known that people would understand, but I don't agree with everything he says. But what I love, and I've always respected this in anyone I've met, is when they just like, they believe it. Yeah. They're like, this is how I think, and I'm not changing for anyone. And there's some respect there that I have, because at times there's a lot of pressure to change. There's a lot of pressure to,
especially now.
Oh yeah, especially. I mean, I can't even imagine if I was an actor, because even actors, they're paid, right? Athletes, you're an employee,
right?
You're not really your boss. You're an employee. I mean, just having to watch everything I say or how I say it because I could get canceled or fired or something. So I respect, you know, like for example, what he's going through right now, I kind of feel like he's kind of caused some of it himself. But man, I guess I kind of respect him. Like, it is what it is. I mean, the guy believes what he says and he kind of lives it. So I do respect those people. I don't know if you feel that way, but I definitely do.
No, that's more or less. We've done a couple, take videos or whatever on it.
Yeah.
And that's more or less where I am with him, and or really any of those types of controversial people, whether it's left or the right. To me, it's very similar. It's like if you're somebody who does what you say you're going to do, and you're somebody that doesn't back down from your beliefs just because of some people that don't know you at all are pressuring you to do so. Right. And the people in your life are your people and they stick close to you no matter what, then like, I don't know, like I got to meet you to have another opinion about it to me. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't have this big of an opinion or this much hate for somebody based on just some stuff that's anecdotal or like a news headline or something like that, unless it's egregious, right? Unless it's like, we can all agree there's a base level of like, hey, you're not allowed in society anymore, guy. Like, sorry, Bill Cosby. You know what I mean? Like, it's time. It's time to like put away the reruns of the Cosby Show. Like, we're good on this one. Case closed. You know what I mean? But like, and I guess we'll see what happens with Tate. But it doesn't seem like anything that they have stuck with him. So like, if there's nothing indictable or nothing that he's found guilty of, and it's kind of like the next step for me to have any sort of another opinion about him is to actually hang out with the guy. Because you can't form opinions on sound bites. I agree.
And I think that's a mistake most people make. And I think it helps though when you're judged. I think building a business helps because you automatically get judged. And so when you get unfairly judged, it helps you see the other side and go immediately. And you don't want to, you don't want to do it to someone else at all.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels unfair when you're in those situations, for sure.
Especially, and they don't have context, or they heard from this person. It's like the telephone game. This person, this person, this person. I'm like, dude, that's like not true at all. Like, who told you?
Yeah, where did you even get that from?
Yeah, crazy.
So where do you think the online marketing game is headed as a whole? Like, there's been, I feel like these kind of transitions that have happened from when it started back in, early 2000s, where it was just email was everything and you had like 70% open rates. And then it just kind of transitioned to, now we have Facebook ads. And it was like iOS 14 dropped a grenade on everybody running traffic, and tracking was all messed up. And then it just switched to, it's high ticket time because you can recoup ad costs. Where do you think we're headed in the next like 3 to 5 years? What are some of the trends you're seeing?
Well, I don't know if you noticed this in your business, but we had times where low ticket would work better and then high ticket would work better. And so sometimes we would go back and forth, so just obviously front end lead generation, then going straight to it. At least in my opinion, what I'm seeing right now, it just seems like there's a lot of lack of trust. Like the trust is lack of trust is at an all-time high. And I think, unfortunately, that's just how it works is, this game started back in the early 2000s before I even can remember. And, a lot of the OGs are like, oh, man, we were running, it was the Wild West, and we were just doing all this stuff. And then the Google slap came. And then this stuff, I started around 2017. It felt less competitive. It felt less people were there. Mm-hmm. I really felt kind of that 2-year head start. People talk about in business. I really feel like I destroyed that. Like I felt like I got in and I had that 2-year head start before, people start copying and seeing what you're doing. But I just feel, at least overall, over the 5 years I've seen, is right now trust is at an all-time low. So to combat that, I think people either are going to have to do more, kind of biz op offers. And biz op to me is how to make an extra $300, doing nothing, right? Because that's what most people want. Or there's just got to be more tangible stuff involved. Because at least like mastermind offers, they're losing their luster, in my opinion, where people are like, yeah, I've heard this before. I did a couple masterminds. It was BS, etc. Yeah. So adding in something a little tangible where, hey, we'll help run your ads, or we'll do all your copy, or we'll give you a couple set or whatever. That's why you're seeing that offer right now.
Sure.
I mean, I've seen that offer
a dozen times in the last
week. At least in this space, that's what I've seen. Obviously, it can depend on the offer in the industry, but it just seems like trust is a lot lower across the board. And so it's taking a lot more effort to get people to come in versus maybe a couple of years ago. That's what I'm saying.
So if you're starting a coaching business from scratch right now, what are the first steps you're taking? Like kind of thinking about it in terms of offer, price point, range,
I mean,
lead gen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would do a lot of the same stuff. Like if I lost everything today and I had to go back and redo it, I would do a lot of the same stuff, because when you don't have money, your options are limited, period. Yeah. And I just started reaching out to people, and I was DMing, I don't know, hundreds a day, and I would get, 30% would respond. I'd book a bunch of calls and I'd close them. I think like
just random DMs on Facebook or
mostly Instagram. You can do either, but I really liked Instagram. I just feel Facebook, people kind of see it coming more. Instagram, they don't have like groups. So to find people, I don't think people get it as much. When you go on Facebook groups, it's like, oh, there's all the hell on the list and everyone's doing it. Yep. So I think it's a lot less effective. But I would start doing that. I think the biggest thing I would focus on though is the offer. And what I've seen from different friends and people I've spoken to, the craziest offer I've seen that is in the internet marketing space, where they're doing over 8 a month. And I can't say who it is and all that stuff, so I'm not going to. But the offer is very biz-op-y, right? It's very like for the average person, which means they can push the ads really far. It can go super wide. The fulfillment's pretty easy, which right again, it's like, and their promise is low. That's the other thing, is like a lower promise, because even me, like people who want to work with us and start a business, I can't be like, hey, how to make an extra, $5,000 a month. Like they're like, I don't give a shit, right? So that's why it's almost like these promises get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you can actually go to someone and say, hey, like we'll help you make an extra $400 a month. Not only is it more believable, but it's easier to fulfill, right? Yeah. And then you can go broader to those types of people. So I think like that's what I would do on like a strategic level. Okay. Differently in terms of like, I can break down stuff if you want. I don't know if the viewers or listeners will want that, but I mean, really, I just DM people. I don't want to call. I close them. Yeah. And what you say and how you say it would probably be a 2 or 3 podcasts, but the actual strategy, it's fairly simple, because it was like door-to-door sales. I did door-to-door, and I was like, oh, this is easier because I can do more volume and I sit in my bed. Yeah, dude, I loved it. I mean, compared to door-to-door, it was cake.
My bed. Yeah. That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point. I did door-to-door for like 5 years, 6 years.
Bro, it'll like make
4 different products.
Yeah, you'll be a man after door-to-door. Door-to-door is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, it certainly puts every other action into perspective. Yeah, because like now I look at everything I do as like but I could be knocking doors right now. So, and we're in Vegas.
And it was just, did you sell security ever?
Yeah, for like a year and a half.
Security to me was like so hard because you had to get in the house.
It's the cold, like when I did solar, I did alarms, I did water purification, and then did satellite TV for a little bit. The only major one I didn't do was pest.
And pest, from at least what I've heard, is one of the easier ones because you can stay outside.
It's a volume play. Yeah, your commissions are smaller, but you don't have to get in the house. You can sell on the doorstep, and you can knock out like 12 accounts in a day.
Right.
Alarms is one of those. It was. I tell people like alarms was like the coldest form of sales I ever did, because it happened immediately and you had to gain trust immediately.
You had to get in the house.
With solar water purification, we'd set up an appointment and come back, because we got to look at your roof. We got to check this out. We got to get these CADs designed. We got shit to do when we're coming back. With alarm, you're just like, knock, knock, can I come in? And then an hour later you're signing a contract. And then before you're leaving the house, like you're high-fiving the installer on the way out. I mean, they're throwing that shit in before their head hits the pillow.
I actually, when I did alarms, I don't know what your strategy was, but I actually did. It was a little bit of a bait and switch where we would put signs in the yard, and I'd be like, oh yeah, like, did you know having this sign, like lower crime rate, et cetera? Like, and I'd be like, so
the marketing pitch.
Yeah, so what I'll do is like, I just need to get your info real quick. Just let me sit down. And then once I was in, I'm like, cool, I got your info. And then I would kind of transition. And it actually worked pretty well. There's other ways.
What was your get in the door line? Was that just let me sit down and?
It kind of was, yeah. Because basically I go up and I say, hey, it's really started to bother you. We're just going around the area because there's been more crime on TV lately in the area, and they're I'm like doing all the visual sides. So like And so I say, so look, sorry, I'm not here to bother you. We're just putting some signs out in the yard. They're completely free. FBI says it's 60% less likely to get broken into, which is true. And then and I say, would you be open to getting a sign? And as soon as they're like, yes, I'm like, cool. I just need to get a quick info. Can I sit down real quick? And I would just start walking. Like I'm just going right in the door. Yeah. And the first few times it was rough, but after you did it for a couple of months, I mean, it just felt so natural.
It's the confidence,
Yeah, it just
people don't say no.
Yeah, it just felt natural. But the crazy thing to me was just fighting. You had 2 types of people. You'd either go to very poor areas where there's a lot of crime, but they didn't have a lot of money, or You go to very affluent areas where they had a ton of money, but there wasn't a lot of crime. And man, I would be back and forth on who I wanted to talk to that day, because these people like give you a drink of water, they let you in the house, but they're like, yeah, like I don't care.
They're sophisticated buyers, bro.
Exactly.
They're not falling for bullshit.
And then here it was like almost easier to convince them, but then yeah, but
they don't
I don't
pass credit though.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, but I don't want this.
That's a 516.
Yeah,
okay,
or like I don't want to give up my cigarettes. I'm like, bro, come on. But it was a great learning experience because everything after that was super easy.
The best neighborhoods we picked were always, it was the worst possible neighborhood that we could find that would still pass credit. That was always like, that was what we were searching for, is like, where's the best where's like the worst neighborhoods where it's not so bad that nobody in there has a decent credit score. And then we go pick the ones with manicured lawns and be like, that one probably has a better credit score.
I had one day where I almost cussed out my manager because I ran 28 credits and I think 26 failed. And I'm like, bro, the whole day, and you're getting in the houses. So I'm like, bro, you're
doing the hard work.
There's not, I can't do anything. No one, they can't even buy. Right. And so I would just get in the house, and after a while I was just like,
yeah.
And they didn't know why my mood changed. I'm like, because you're a freaking E credit.
E.
And for everyone listening, there's A through F, and you can only sell usually C, like A, B, or C. So
when you call in, they're like, this is a D, there's the F, and it's like, oh, damn it, all the hard work, I just pitched them, I got them to say yes, now I'm on the phone.
I would try, and that was something that you learned too, though, is trying to get that info quick. I get it. Let me just verify real quick, because I ended up wasting all the time. Sometimes where you'd go through a whole pitch like you just said, you don't even buy.
The line that I would use at the door to get in was, do you want me to take my shoes off? Because however you answer, I'm coming inside, right?
They're like, no. Oh, they're like, no. They're like, okay.
Yeah, no,
yes,
don't take the shoes off. And I walk in. Yes, okay, I take my shoes off and I walk in. You know what I mean?
I actually love that. So, that's actually pretty slick.
Yeah, that was the line, bro. That was the line we used to use. But we would do it a little bit. We would go to crime neighborhoods that like recently had a break in, and we'd like show them on the like, this house right here just got broken into. We're here. We have this this grant local company put together where we give you equipment. So we'd like I'd show them like a little bit at the door, and then just be like, I just need 2 quick seconds to kind of walk you through the rest of the house, see how it works. So I'm gonna take my shoes off, and then boom, in the house.
Did you ever when you first started, did it shock you at how some of the homes looked?
Yeah.
I remember the first time I got dropped off, I had no idea what I got into. I didn't realize people lived in those homes. Like I actually sat there and went, man, people live in these things, because these homes, they must have cost less than, like, I'm talking less than 50 G's.
Yeah, like you dropped me off in Haiti? Like, where are we right now?
Like, at least, yeah. And so, I remember hearing gunshots and stuff, and then 2 months in, I'm like, cops will come up, dude, do you know where you are? I'm like, oh, I know exactly where I am. I'm meant to be here. It just...
I actually researched this place. Yeah.
It was so scary the first day I did it. I remember feeling that way. And then, it gets, it's your normal environment. You get used to it. But I remember the first time I got dropped off, I was scared shitless. Did
you, of course, I grew up in Lancaster, California, which is like, it's like northern LA County, where basically when they flush the prisons and incentivize them to go somewhere, they say, hey, go to Lancaster, Palmdale, because it's still in LA County, but it's significantly cheaper than LA.
Right. So
that's where like commuters live and where people that can't afford to live in LA live when they get kicked out of the prison. So that was kind of where I grew up. So I was pretty used to those types of neighborhoods. But what shocked me was just that like the stuff worked, because it was my first introduction to sales, was doing door to door. And it was just like, when I would get into people's houses at first, it was like, you just let me into your home? Like, I'm just a dude that just knocked on your door.
And
to like, psychology's strong,
I think to your point, though, it's also the sophistication, right? So the more sophisticated or more affluent the area, it would get tougher, because they're like, bro, hey, we can get you this alarm for this. He's like, I can literally call them on the cell number. It's fine, man. So I think to your point, it was kind of the same thing, where usually the lower income areas it was kind of easier to convince them versus the more affluent areas. And, I found that all the time.
For sure. It was counterintuitive, because like your brain goes, well, we got to go find the people with money. And it's like, well, we don't make money on money. We make money on financing. So like we go find the people that want to pay monthly payments, which is what makes solar such a powerful game. And I still kick myself in the ass for not seeing the opportunity in front of me, because I was knocking solar back in like 2012.
Oh, wow. That was way back.
Which, yeah, nobody was doing it back then. There was like 2-3 players in the game. This is before Vivint did solar. Actually, I think Vivint was making the transition into solar at the time from just doing alarms. But I was a college kid. I was going to school for ministry, actually, and thought that's what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So I was just like, oh, this is extra money. Cool. And then when I figured out I wasn't going to ministry, I was still selling solar. I switched to alarms because at the time the industry was so young and ripe that like they were paying just crap commissions compared to what they get paid now. So I would get paid like $1,000, $1,200 on a deal selling solar on a 6-week, 8-week install time with 50% commission, 50% commission. And I was like, oh, I can sell an alarm, make $800, install tonight and be paid next week. Like that seems like a way better deal. But I just didn't realize what was in front of me. I did not understand the nature of the solar game at all. Because if I did, I would have been like, holy shit, I can knock a door and make $8,000 on a solar deal. Like, because these reps now are spoiled. Yeah,
just longer. Just the only thing with it is just the longer sales cycle.
Longer sales cycle. It's like real estate. It's just a real estate sales cycle. But now, even now though, like a lot of municipalities and local governments are like all about solar, so they help you in terms of like the permitting process. Like it's faster. You get paid 8 times more money than I got paid at the time. But I still kick myself for that, dude, because I was like, oh, I could have made so much money in solar had I just even like thought about something besides my stupid commission check, you know? Yeah. But well, anyway, dude, I know we're coming close on time. I want to chat a little bit more about kind of your life philosophy now. Sounds like we similar upbringings in terms of I grew up also extremely religious. I went to Bible college. I thought that was what I was going to be doing. It sounds like you grew up religious, kind of moved away from it, went a little bit back and forth and stuff without getting too far into it if you don't want to. What's your kind of philosophy or take on, you know, why we're even here to begin with and you know, what all this is for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I hit my first $1 million month, that was when I was really going through this because that had been my goal since I started business. And when I hit that, I just felt that was the apex of business, right? I was like $1 million a month, right? And so I started going to like a lot of therapy and I started talking to people. And again, this is just me. So, you know, not to offend anyone, but I really, you know, I just felt a lot of times when I'd ask people, I wasn't really getting answers. And maybe the problem was I was hoping they would answer it for me. But I think reality is that, you know, there is no like answer per se. There's no one out there to tell you with 100% certainty what is true and what isn't true. So for me, the nihilist approach has been a little bit more helpful. I don't, you know, it's a balance because basically nihilists say, you know, nothing matters, so it doesn't really matter what we do. And I agree to that to a certain point. At the same time, you know, it can go pretty far, right? So
sure.
Then your family doesn't matter, and then this person doesn't matter. Right. So I just think for me, what's been the most helpful is, I'll be honest, like I don't necessarily know. I do think, at least in my opinion, I think it's a little crazy to think that, you know, all this just happened from a Big Bang Theory. That I don't know if I really roll with that. I think someone created this. But in terms of answering deeper questions, I've stopped for now because it almost frustrated me where, you know, where people will say, hey, I'm not happy. And a nihilist would say, well, why does that matter? And I actually like that question better versus you're creating this deficit. And if you don't feel a certain way, then you're constantly trying to like, what's the problem? What's the problem? Sure. And so whether there's a problem or not doesn't really matter to me. The thing that I think is most helpful is like, hey, I don't feel good today. And instead of pondering, trying to figure out, I'm just like, hey, I don't feel good today. It's all good. This is life. It's up and down. You'll feel better tomorrow. And then just move with my day. That has been more helpful for me personally. I know not everyone, but for me, that's more helpful than sitting and trying to figure every little thing out. Because sometimes I just don't know if there's an answer for everything. Yeah,
no, I agree. I tend to agree with that almost completely. There's just not much yet. You don't have control over everything. And I think happiness is ultimately, it's a fleeting feeling that exists. It's an emotion that we feel. And there's just zero way to have complete control over your emotions all the time. That's why we're emotions. We're meant to experience them all on a spectrum at any given time. So to think that you're only going to experience happiness, and then when you don't, fault yourself for not experiencing happiness and start tearing yourself down, and you get just a spiraling mode of beating yourself up, which isn't going to make you happy anyway. Just like, I just think that there's more worthy things to pursue than happiness itself. And I would say meaning is one of them. Is like, meaning is a more worthy pursuit than happiness, which I think there's some evidence for. And then I was listening to this, forget his name. He was the founder, the father of positive psychology. And he was saying that mattering is even more important than meaning is, because mattering can actually measure up to something. Like you matter to like the people around you, to relationships, to an organization functioning. Like mattering is even more important than meaning. So I kind of like built that hierarchy in my mind a little bit ago, which has been somewhat helpful for me as I try to work through them. And like you said, deal with changing emotions on a daily basis. Now I got 2 small kids. My wife works. I have a couple businesses. Like things are hectic right now. It's strange time, and so it's been helpful for me in just like kind of the way that Hormozi puts in his book about offer is or market is greater than offer is greater than persuasion ability, right? So in my head now, I kind of have it as like mattering is greater than meaning is greater than happiness, and I think that's a better like frame to view it in, because I have more control over whether I matter or not, because it becomes a game of like, how do I become a more valuable human being? And I have more control over whether or not I'm a valuable human being, because I can work on my skill set. I can work on my connections. I can, there's things that I can add to that, rather than there's this like arbitrary moving target of like throwing a dart, at a constantly moving dartboard and hoping you hit something and calling it happiness,
Yeah. I think there's also just power in, deciding when people say, well, what matters? I think just deciding what matters to you. Yeah. Because it is interesting just hearing, as you start looking down the path of this type of stuff, people say, well, this ruler, 3,000 years ago had 800 wives and, ruled from here to here, and you don't know who he is. And that actually was probably what really scared me when I hit the $1 million a month, because I remember I was looking out over Miami and I'm in this ridiculously sick penthouse and the view is ridiculous. And I'm just thinking, man, like Mark Zuckerberg has done this, and, Bill Gates has done this, and Elon's done this. And, still in the grand scheme, it's like in the world, they're small. Yeah. And I think that thought was so deflating for me, because I go, man, if they're small, then obviously I'm even, who am I? And so I think it's just really figuring out what brings you happiness and fulfillment, and what kind of gives you that oomph in life. Yeah. And then you just attack it, and deep down, hey, it doesn't really matter, but it matters to me. And that has been a more helpful thought than, trying to go through life like, hey, if I do this, it's going to matter. Like even charity work, it's been hard for me sometimes, because I go, man, like I'm only helping these few kids. Yeah. And when they die, there's gonna be more of these kids, and it's like it never ends. And sometimes it just feels a little hopeless if you go down that hole. And so I think the way you stay out of it is you just go, look, a lot of what you do probably won't have a significant like impact in the grand scheme of the world or whatever, but if it matters to you and it matters like to those kids, then it is important. So I wish there's a better answer, but I'll be honest with you, it's a thing that it was hard for me for a long time.
Well, closing this up, dude, one last question for you. I'd like to throw this in the works sometimes with people. If you could create a video that you knew was going to go viral and everybody in the world would see the message in the video, what message would you want in that viral video?
I just think be kind. It's kind of sad to me that the reason I'm successful is because people are mean to me. And I'm grateful in hindsight, right? Like it's the way of the world. But man, I was like a nice kid, and I remember my parents just raised me really well and just be respectful and nice to people. And that was like really hard. That was very hard for me as a child to just have people be mean to me, and I didn't even know why. Yeah. And everyone's going through their own battles. And sometimes I've actually found out after the fact that maybe I wasn't very nice to someone, or I said something, maybe I was a little rough, or I said it, just whatever. And then I find out they're going through something really terrible. And I just think if everyone could just be kind and like try to help each other, it's kind of that message Gary Vee sends.
Yeah.
It's a good message. It's a good message because we're all going through stuff, and social media exacerbates it. I think I'm really glad it came about because it's how I built my whole life. But before social media, or if people were on social media, I don't think you have as many problems as you do now. You only married Sally or Jill down the street. You didn't have 800 million girls on Instagram you could choose from. You didn't have people saying mean stuff to you. You didn't have this kind of keeping up with the Joneses as much as you did. And so all that can kind of make someone already feel like they're not good enough. And then you exacerbate that with people being mean to you. It's like, just be nice. And so that would be the message. That would be the message probably.
Love it, dude. Hey, thanks for coming on, man. I know we talked about a lot of different stuff, but I appreciate you taking the time. We'll get you out to the next spot wherever you're headed. So,
thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, appreciate it, dude.
Pleasure.
Thanks so much.
All right, brother.